Information is vital to every individual. A platform where technology is a medium to pass information. You can always catch up on all information written in the newspapers, even without having one. Join us on The Press.
Reaching live from the Abuja studio.
On The Punch for this morning. The Blueprint newspaper, Nigerian Tribune this morning.
As we give you information and opinions about current events and topical issues on politics, business, sports, entertainment, weather forecasts, and lots more in the local city, across all states, and across all countries. Showing daily on Startimes.
Welcome everybody to Joy Asonye live here on KAFTAN television. My name is Joy Asonye. As usual, like yesterday rather, we are still analyzing the dynamics of the 2023 polls, looking at the indices that influence the outcome of the elections that held on the 25th of February and 18th of March. While election results are still being collated, it's time to look at those indices like youth participation and the third force. I remember when in the build-up of the elections, we were talking about the power of the third force. Did it actually influence the outcome of the elections? We'll be discussing all of this with my guest who's seated here at the moment. He is Barrister Mike Adinye. He's a legal practitioner and a political analyst. Thank you so much for being part of the program.
Thank you very much.
Yes. Later on the program, we would also connect with Kemi, who would be joining us via phone. We will connect with her to give us her insight. But for now, we are going for a short break and return with more. Stay with us. Welcome back from that. Like I said earlier, we have Mike Adinye here in the studio to do justice to the topic, analyzing the dynamics of the 2023 polls. Mike, it's so good to have you join us, but I would like us to start. I mean, at the build-up of the elections, we advocated for that third force and to see more competition, healthy competition in our electoral process. It has always, for a long time, been APC and PDP. I must admit that for once, we weren't sure who would eventually emerge, especially in the presidential. And I know it cuts across the state elections as well. But let me just steal your brain, really, as to what you thought was going to really the outcome. Was it the outcome, was it what you had thought or speculated?
Well, unfortunately, what played out was far, far different from what we expected as Nigerians.
Right.
We saw where those who occupy political positions, became so desperate and they wanted it by all means. You know, it was a total system failure, you know, to the chagrin of Nigerians. It's not what we expected at all. You know,
Are you talking about the conduct of the polls?
yeah, the general conduct of the elections, yes.
Right.
What turned out, you know, at the end of the day, was a far cry from what we expected as Nigerians. And that has eventually and unfortunately, you know, brought down, you know, the morale and, you know, the position of Nigeria in the Committee of Nations.
Well, you're jumping the gun here. I would love to know if the third force that was predicted by several political speculators, if you think it actually did influence the turnout of the elections.
In the first election, presidential election, yes, it did. But in the governorship election, it did not, because a lot of persons had lost confidence in the system or the umpire. We never expected something different, you know, what cause of what played out. You know, in the first election, for instance, the presidential election, there's this fear of the unknown. You know, remember in our previous editions, I always call it a political tsunami. We expected so much to happen, especially when we had so much confidence from INEC that something was going to happen differently, you know, contrary to what has always been, where people rig election to occupy political positions. But unfortunately, what came out at the end of the day was far, far, far different from what we expected. And that has further dampened our morale.
Right. Now, if you look at the elections and how the spread of voting, we saw two major forces. We saw the NNPP and the Labour Party play a very vital role in fighting, literally fighting the top or more popular political parties, which is the PDP and the APC. Would you say that that's healthy in a democracy, or like a lot of people had said? I remember for those who were against the Labour Party, they criticized the Labour Party instead, were constantly saying that a vote for the Labour Party would only divide the votes for the PDP. I mean, when it comes to, it won't affect the APC. And when they were asking for a merger and all of that, do you think that's exactly what eventually happened?
No, well, it did to some extent. But I think it rather gave the ruling party the enablement to go haywire, to make sure that they get it by all means. You know, initially what we were thinking was the fear of Labour Party was going to be the beginning of wisdom for other political parties. You know, it sent cold in the spines of the ruling party. And that gave them the enablement or the insight into exploring other means to subvert the will of the people. And that actually is what played out at the end of the day.
Okay. Let's talk about the tensions that was experienced across board in some states. Not all states. I hear there were states that were relatively calm. But let's talk about Lagos and the ethnic profiling that went there, and the bias and the voter intimidation that went on in Lagos State. That's very concerning for our democratic process. But what would you say when you saw all that happened? The reports from journalists were attacked. It was horrible for the kind of democracy some of us had thought we were practicing in Nigeria. So what were your thoughts when you saw that?
Well, there are two states in Nigeria that actually worked negatively or contrary to the expectations of Nigerians, Lagos State and Rivers State.
Exactly.
Some persons were so blunt about it, they never hid their feelings.
No apologies.
No apology, no nothing. They were all desperate. We saw desperation. We saw man inhumanity to man. In fact, Nigeria is, like I will always say, is a state of nation. And if we are all brothers and sisters in this country, I don't think that anybody has the right to determine what the other person should do. We have, you know, you cannot, as a Nigerian, force or coerce somebody to vote for a particular candidate of your choice. And that's what played out in Lagos. And that has further brought a lot of ethnic tension in the country. There are some persons who behaved as if they are above the law. They can do certain things and go away with it, probably because they are associated with particular individuals who are untouchable in this country. And that is not good enough for a nascent democracy. So I can mention names, like the MC Olumo and the rest, who came out without any iota of fear, irrespective of the presidential directive, that whoever truncates or tries to truncate this process should be dealt with according to the laws of the land. But that did not play out. As if the president only backed but couldn't bite. Because we saw some of this, they were not hiding their feelings. They were not hiding it. They did it openly, blatantly. I don't know. I don't know why some persons were not treated the way others were treated. Lagos State, that used to be the home of every Nigerian, is turning out to be an ethnic biased state in this country. And that is not going on well for us as a people that have come together to live as one indivisible and indissoluble people in this country.
What do you think the security agencies should have done? Because when the president makes proclamations like that, we expect that institutions that have the mandate to follow through would go see the end of it, and punitive measures should be meted. But we didn't see that happen. Are you still blaming the president and not the security agencies for these lapses?
Everybody is culpable. When the president gave that order, it's a presidential order. Some persons would have been brought to book. Immediately, some persons made inciting statements against certain tribes in this country. Those who would have been arrested and dealt with according to the laws of the land. But nothing happened. They went on a frolic of their own, did whatever they wanted to do, did whatever threats or enforced the threats they had, promised, and nothing happened up to today. And that's what snowballed into the governorship election. They repeated the same thing in the governorship election because they did the first one and nothing happened. So they felt that, well, if nothing had happened in the first attempt, let's go ahead and do it in the second attempt. And that's what played out. It's very, very dangerous for us as a people. And I don't think
Adinye,
it's right
I
for
need
us
you
to
to,
continue that way.
You had mentioned the president, and that's where my focus is. It's easy to say, okay, yes, the president had said so. Is it the president you would solely say has not done more? Should he have arrested these people himself? Because
it's not the place of the president to arrest for
because you mentioned the president in your conversation.
I heard it, and we're all happy about it. And that's what gave us the enablement to go out there and exercise our franchise. The president gave that order, gave that directive. But those who were supposed to execute or implement these directives were not there to do it. In some cases, they would simply watch and see some of these shenanigans play out.
Right.
And then nothing happened. So where do we stand as a people? Who should we believe? Who should we run to?
In the build-up of this election, some of us had seen the many stakeholders, the security agents, the journalists. There was that synergy and preparation towards these elections. And I remember very well that there were trainings. I remember the security agencies telling us there were trainings towards the conduct of these elections. If you have to appraise the activities of these security agents during the polls, would you say that they scored well?
I would score them 20%, 20 over 100, because I've not seen anybody that's been brought to book. Everyone we saw crises all over the country. Nobody was arrested. Nobody has been charged to court. Nobody's in prison. So what use were there? If nobody was arrested, then everybody was allowed to do whatever they wanted. It was a free fight. Defend yourself, go out there, do whatever you can do. In as much as you're supporting a particular candidate, you're exempted from punitive measures. Nothing can happen to you. And that's what played out. The security agent, remember that prior to this election, we had the Peace Summit organized by Bishop Hassan Koka and Abdul Salam Abubakar, where all political parties and their stakeholders were brought in to sign the peace accord. But at the end of the day, did we really have peace in this election? It's a sham. We're all disappointed. We're frustrated. Take note that prior to this election, we had successfully curbed voters' apathy. Maybe what has happened now, everybody would rather think of his life, sparing his life, rather than go out there to watch the character or the shenanigans of politicians who probably are anchored with some major persons who feel they own this country and therefore they can do anything and go away with it.
Now, prior to the elections, there was the wave of awareness. And would you say that it was all social media, as a lot of people had called it before the elections? Because if you look at the numbers, INEC, that's Independent National Electoral Commission, the electoral umpire had told us that they had given out about 87 million voter cards. However, we saw the voter the collation, the result, and we saw that only about over 24 million voters indeed casted their vote.
Are you talking about the presidential election?
I'm talking about the presidential. I'm talking about the presidential right now. Yeah,
because there are some threats that were not properly handled or copped. If they were properly handled, people would have come out to vote. Some persons were scared of going out to vote. And, the cash crunch too, availability of cash, equally prevented some persons from traveling to go and vote. I'm not surprised that we had that number of persons coming out. Because take note that when the students and other Nigerian youths went out to to register for their PVCs, that period was when ASU was on strike. But when they eventually called off their strike, they had a short time to have lectures, which has snowballed into exams and all that. Shortly after that, even some students were still writing exams when universities gave a 2 weeks break to enable the students go out to cast their vote or to participate in the election. But at the end of the day, there was no money in circulation. People could hardly travel. People could hardly eat. And that is why the number, dropped drastically. It's a contributory factor that led to the drop in the number of voters or political sovereign, those who actually went out to vote.
So moving forward, if you have to now suggest, especially to curb this voter apathy, do you think Nigeria has gotten there in terms of technological voting, where we can sit in the studio here to say, I have casted my vote with my phones, like we often do with our banking apps and other applications? It seems like it's very cumbersome when it comes to Nigeria and the federal government organizing it. But when private sector have to come up with ways that will make business transactions seamless, it's not such a hurdle.
We have lost confidence in the system. Because for one, even the electoral umpires failed or acted differently. Take note that the INEC chairman had promised Nigerians that after voting, results will be transmitted electronically to a central database. But that did not happen. At some point, everything was cut off. It was shut down. In fact, it was cut off from the entire system. We didn't even know what was happening. INEC complained that the server was not working. You go to some places, you hear that the beavers is not working. So where do we go from here? At what point in time would the government and its agencies stop telling us lies? We're tired of hearing all these lies. How will you say a thing? And at the end of the day, you act differently. In the civilized world, or Western world, so to say, such persons would have tendered their resignation. If you say we're going to do this, we're electronically, how do you call it? We are now technologically, savvy. Whatever we're doing in the election will be driven by technology. At the end of the day, you start complaining of those devices that they've employed. To where do we rely on that? And because INEC could not keep to their promise, and it became very easy for politicians to rig the election. In some polling units, we saw situations where people were using their hands to feel, to thumbprint on ballot papers without reliance on the beavers. If INEC had kept, to their promise of giving us a beavers that will work, wherein results will be transmitted electronically, the politicians who are desperate and desiring of ruling us by force would not have had access to ballot papers, wherein they employed people to cast their illicit votes to enable them have jumbo votes to be able to, to win elections. That's what played out. If INEC had not failed, I don't think we would have witnessed that in the last election.
Do you think there's such a perfect process? Because INEC has also come out to say that they had technical issues that were unprecedented, even though they had planned to electronically transmit results, and they did not plan that the beavers, that's the bimodal voter accreditation system, will have issues. Do you think there will be ever such a seamless 100% elections without such hitches? And about the IREV, that's the INEC results viewing portal, INEC had given a complaint that while upscaling from the off-cycle elections, we saw the problem of overwhelming data that came from the Senate election and the presidential election. So you don't believe those excuses hold water?
I don't believe. When you look at what the federal government spent on this election, I don't believe that. It's because INEC failed. Primarily, the people we should hold responsible for the failure in the system is those who work in INEC.
Those who work in INEC?
INEC, yes. The electoral umpire, whoever was given any responsibility as far as the election was concerned, should be held responsible. First of all, it was because INEC failed that the system went comatose. It was because INEC failed that politicians had a window to do whatever they did, to steal the mandate of the people. We no longer, at that point, we no longer had a genuine elections where true leaders emerged.
Okay, well, we'll go for a very short break right now, then return to speak with Kemi Asekun, who will be joining us via phone. Stay with us, we'll be right back. This is still Joy Asonye Live.
My name is Sheilo BCFR, the Black Comedian of the Federal Republic. I tell you, when it comes to the best of entertainment, the best of news, the best of information, something that is educative, you're right here at the best place to see that. It's KAFTAN TV. You know what? Increase the volume. Keep watching. Don't touch the dial, okay?
It's your girl Nkechi Blessing Sunday. I want you all to keep watching KAFTAN TV.
Please keep watching KAFTAN TV. It is the best TV station in the country. They're doing an amazing job. Please do not touch the dial. Keep watching. Thank you.
My name is Sheilo BCFR, the Black Comedian of the Federal Republic. I tell you, when it comes to the best of entertainment, the best of news, the best of information, something that is educative, you're right here at the best place to see that. It's KAFTAN TV. You know what? Increase the volume. Keep watching. Don't touch the dial, okay?
It's your girl Nkechi Blessing Sunday. I want you all to keep watching KAFTAN TV.
Please keep watching KAFTAN TV. It is the best TV station in the country. They're doing an amazing job. Please do not touch the dial. Keep watching. Thank you.
My name is Sheilo BCFR, the Black Comedian of the Federal Republic. I tell you, when it comes to the best of entertainment, the best of news, the best of information, something that is educative, you're right here at the best place to see that. It's KAFTAN TV. You know what? Increase the volume. Keep watching. Don't touch the dial, okay?
It's your girl Nkechi Blessing Sunday. I want you all to keep watching KAFTAN TV.
This is still Joy Asonye Live, where we are discussing, analyzing the dynamics of the 2023 polls. Like I said earlier, we are connecting via phone with Kemi Asekun. She's a member of the APC Presidential Campaign Council. She's also known as Kem. Kem, hello.
Hi, good evening, Joy. It's great to be on Joy Asonye Live. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Now, we're still talking about the polls, the just concluded polls. And in your words, what would you say INEC could have done better in retrospect to make these polls less, with less hurdles and more seamless?
Well, I think I will first start by commending INEC for what they have done thus far. The Beavers was a game changer, and it also, to the best of my knowledge, reduced, the incidents that we used to have in the past of our elections, where you just have people snatching ballot boxes and all of that. With that type of innovation, it means that should anybody try that, you're playing with the results of that particular polling unit. But what they could have done better, in some cases, the officials could have arrived a lot earlier. Perhaps they could have gotten more familiar with the places that they were supposed to officiate. Perhaps they should have done a recce, a few days before the actual elections and all of that. There were also instances where their officials could have been more familiar with the machines themselves, so that in cases where you had, and I'm talking about the ad hoc staff now, the NYSC guys and all of that, in places where some of them were they appeared that they weren't too sure of what to do when challenges that could have happened in the case of any machine, right? When such challenges came up, they seemed to be unaware of what to do in such instances, and that left quite a few people, a few voters agitated, irritated, and all of that. But one thing is clear. for the first time since 1999, Nigerians felt that their votes will count, and so they trooped out and, exercised their franchise. Before now, what we used to have were people who felt that their votes will not count, and since it will not count, they couldn't be bothered. Right. Another thing that INEC did correctly is to help the populace understand that in this democracy, your participation is what will determine the results of whoever gets voted into power. And I think the populace understood that. Some people have said quite a number of unfair things to INEC and even its chairman. But if you look back at 1999 to date, and you ask yourself, especially for those of us who witnessed 1999 elections as adults, right? And you look at the elections we had in 2023, you would realize that whether those who did not witness those elections like it or not, our elections have grown. Our elections have matured. We must also give kudos to President Muhammadu Buhari, who said people should go out and vote their choices, which in a way, for some people in the APC seems like he was being, he wasn't being fair to the president-elect. However, it helped, to give credibility to the elections we eventually, where the president-elect, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, actually emerged as winner. There was that aspect of him saying, I am the president, but I will not interfere. In the cases where he won, where he had to canvass for votes for the president-elect, he did as a party man. But as a president, he stood, and he was neutral, which, and some people may agree with or may not agree with, but at least the bulk of Nigerians, especially those of us who experienced all the other elections as adults, the bulk of Nigerians could see that this election happens to be the best elections we have conducted so far, whether the Gen Zs agree with it or not, because there was a time the sitting president,
Well, Kemi, I mean, you have made a very vital point, but a lot of Nigerians had confidence. We know how these elections had been over the years, and so hence the voter apathy that often happens. But there was the wave of trust and awareness this time. Would you say that with the intimidation that we saw, with
I'm sorry, I would like to find out in specifics what you mean by intimidation.
In cases, now, I mean, you must have also seen reports where citizens are of a certain political party are flogging, it was that bad, flogging electorates to say if you don't vote a certain party, you will not be allowed to vote in this polling unit. And we saw the security agencies not doing anything.
I did not see flogging, but I did see where there were threats. People, someone
there
on
were
the
threats
video
as well. But does that concern you about our democracy?
Well, let me put it this way, right? Threats should never be a part of democracy. It should never be, because there must be freedom to exercise your franchise as a citizen. There were incidents in the East where some people said, oh, you won't vote APC for, yeah, you won't vote, and all of that. But in truth, if you look at where we are coming from, and I will say it again, if you look at where we are coming from, 1999 elections, that wasn't even that bad, because many of the citizens were not awake to what democracy really was. There was the aspect where the Southwest initially said they were boycotting the presidential elections at that time, but eventually, decided to go in for it, which was also one of the major reasons why the person who won at that time won. But if you look at the elections critically, and I say it again, 1999, 2003, 2007, and then you take another look at 2011, you'd realize that our elections are not what they used to be. It is maturing. The case where someone was threatening, right? Back in 2003,
really. There were several cases.
It would have been,
yeah, there were several cases.
Yeah, I'm coming. I'm saying our democracy is maturing.
Right.
In the case where there were threats, right? Back in 2003, back in 2007, when the sitting president at that time said this election was a do or die affair, it was cutlasses, it was guns. Yes, in this instance, I think I got news that somewhere in Lagos State someone went into the estate and was beaten or killed or something like that.
Several deaths as well.
In those elections, I do not have the statistics, but if you would look it up, you will see that the number of people who lost their lives simply because they were trying to vote or simply because they were supporting a particular party. And I know that the statisticians will do it, right? In time, they will come up with what the statistics, or they will come up with what the statistics
I saw one, 109. That was before the Gubai polls, actually. 109 had died with around election-related issues. 109 people.
Are you talking about election day, or are you talking about pre-election and all of that? Because
Building up
you see,
to the
some of these
elections,
things
really.
we need to be very clear. We need to be very clear.
Okay,
I
Kemi,
would
let
say
me
again,
take this conversation to Mike Adinye, who is in the studio right now. He seemed to want to respond to some of the things you have said. Mike, I could see you wanted to say something.
Yes. Okay. Kemi, good evening. With the promises made by INEC, we're thinking that Nigerians had gone past, those era where we had people being brutalized for not supporting a particular candidate. And that's why the youths of this country decided to go to INEC to register and then pick up their PVCs. But at the end of the day, what played out was a far cry different from what we expected as youths of this country. But because I heard you comparing what played out in 2023, with what used to be in the past. But that is long gone. We should, like what the Bible will always say, or let us understand, that should we continue in sin, that grace will abound. The fact that we have gone past that era of people being brutalized or people not casting their votes freely, does not mean that we should begin to, appreciate the fact that we did not record incidences in this 2023 election. Like in Lagos, for instance, a particular person came out to say a particular tribe should relocate from Lagos if they are not supporting a particular candidate. In Port Harcourt, for instance, the same thing played out. In those days, these things were hidden. But right now, what we're seeing being played out is people coming out, without hiding their faces. They were all captured on camera, where they were threatening people and mandating them to vote for particular candidates. We have gone past that stage, for goodness sake. And I don't think it's helping us to grow as a people, or it's helping our democracy or, electoral jurisprudence to grow the way it is, being played in Nigeria, especially in this 2023 election.
Okay, Kemi, do you have a response for that? Otherwise, I would like to move on now to talk about the young people, the apathy we saw during the gubernatorial polls. Would you say that it is because of some of the hiccups and hurdles that was faced during the presidential polls that culminated to the voter apathy?
Your account is low. Please recharge.
Okay, we can get Kemi right now, but we'll try to connect again. So I wanted to also let me put the question to you. Do you think it is a case of what happened during the presidential elections that culminated to the voter apathy?
It affected the governorship election, the subsequent election.
Because for the first
negatively,
time,
because the youths came out full of expectation in the presidential election. At the end of the day, INEC was seen not to be ready. The ad hoc staff were not properly trained. Some did not even know how to use the divas because they were hurried into some of these things. Even when INEC had an ample time, a long time to get the ad hoc staff prepared. But that did not play out. That did not happen. So when they became disappointed as a result of what was seen in the field in the first election, the desire to go out there for the second election was no longer there because they had this conclusion that the election would still be rigged.
Okay,
that's what played out.
Kemi, can you hear us?
Now I can. Can I quickly respond to Mike because your question went over my head? I will do that in a few minutes. I think one of the first things we need to understand is that in every democracy, there will be a winner and there will be someone who will have to try again. That's number one. Number two, Mike also said, he noted that the youth of the country were expecting something and they got something differently. It would interest you to know that the bulk of the people who will vote in an election in Nigeria today are not even on social media. And that social media is a very small fraction where the youths are, where the youths mostly are. Social media is a very small fraction of the entirety of the voting populace of Nigeria. Now, the fact that the youth expected something and they did not get the results they had expected is what is expected of a democracy, because the youth alone do not constitute the voting populace. You would agree with me that before now, there were voters who did not include these youth. And when you are looking at in an election, for an election season, the way you have it in America, where you have the blue states and the red states, for an election to simply just change from a blue state to a red state is almost impossible. And you can do your research about this, right? Usually, if a blue state is going into a red state, it becomes a purple state yet,
right?
First. The good thing about it is, sorry?
Go ahead. I was agreeing with you.
Okay. The good thing about it is, for the first time, the Nigerian youth have decided to take more seriously their lives in terms of deciding who leads them, which is a beautiful thing. However, typical of what the youths will do, which I hope they will not this time around, is that they will go and rest and then start a fire brigade approach come 2026 going into 2027. So if the youths were expecting a result and they did not get the result they were expecting, but for the life of me, their candidates came as far as no other, what you will call it now, third leg in an election came. That should tell you that the elections to a very large extent was credible. There are states that are traditionally PDP states. There are states that are traditionally APC states. Now, these states lost some of their electorate or some of their votes to this third leg in the election. And it wasn't a small sum. Now, in the calculations of an election, it's always about multiplication and addition, never subtraction and division. So, if we look at it critically and we say that the candidate of this third hand, right, in this election used to be the second in command to the candidate of the second person in this election, that means that whether you like it or not, they have split their votes between themselves. Let us not forget the NNPP, which is Kwakwanso. Now, Kwakwanso Obi Atiku used to be in the same party. These three people have gone separate. Let's just not talk about the governors that they lost in going into the elections, the G5 and the G7, which includes Governor Dave Umahi and Governor Ayadi. If you look at the elections, unemotionally, and you calculate as a strategist, an election strategist, you will see that from the division that these people came up with, it was almost practically impossible for them to have thrown the candidate of the APC. And I'm not even speaking as a party person right now. I'm speaking as someone who is looking at things. So yes, the youths were emotional. Yes, the youths were expectant. Yes, the youths were hoping. But you see, emotions, hope, expectation do not win elections. What wins elections is strategy. What's your strategy? How are you going about it? So I understand how Mike feels, and I understand the expectations of the youth, but I will hope and pray that they will not sleep now, and they will continue to work towards the next election, so that at the next election, God forbid that the candidate of the APC, who's my candidate, Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, doesn't do well enough, then you can tell them, well, we no longer want you.
Okay, let's move a little away.
A possibility.
Yeah, let's move a little away from the elections and talk about governance. Do you think that the wave of awareness that we saw during the elections would affect the productivity of the incoming elected governors and presidents?
I totally think so. I totally think so. So I see now that the governors, the politicians themselves now realize that if you do not do the work, if you do not serve the people as you should, you will be on your way out. There have been so many upsets in these elections. There have been so many close calls in these elections, right? And that tells you once again, and I repeat, that our democracy is maturing. That the governors are now on their feet. You don't do well, you're on your way out.
Okay, I'll take this question.
Look at the case of Zamfara, for example.
Right.
Sorry?
Okay, I wanted to, before you give us the case of Zamfara, I would like Mike to also give us his ideas about how the citizens, do we even know as citizens how to hold government from all stratas accountable for their doings or misdemeanors?
Well, it's very obvious now. I want to agree with Kemi on that aspect because some governors, some of them wanted to go to the Senate. Some wanted to return, were all voted out. They lost the elections. For instance, Benue State, had a problem. Cross River State, my governor, Professor Ben Ayade, equally wanted to go to the Senate, but he was defeated at the end of the day, even when he did his best to please his people. So a lot of persons are becoming conscious. Even the youths have decided, that they have their destiny. They now have that awareness that they have their destinies in their hands, and they cannot get what they want sleeping. So everyone is conscious. On that aspect, I want to agree with Kemi that we are getting matured, But what I was saying earlier that I never, accepted or agreed was the fact that some persons were brutalized and forced to cast their votes for particular candidates. I am not against whoever emerged as the winner. I have not made reference to that. But the process is what I am looking at. The aspect of brutalizing people or forcing people or compelling people to vote for particular candidates is what I totally disagree. Well, whatever has happened now is an eye-opener to governors and even to the president, with the consciousness of the fact that if he doesn't do well, at the end of this regime, he may not come back. And the same thing plays out, and it's going to play out among the governors, even senators and House of Rep members. To even get down to state houses of assembly, if you do not do well or represent your people very well, just be prepared to leave the seat at the end of the day or at the end of the tenure.
Okay, Kemi, you're about to give us an example of Zamfara.
Yeah. I was saying that look at Zamfara, look at the upsets the candidates there, threw up against the governor. Look at places like the close call in Nasarawa. Look at the truth about it is, and I totally agree with Michael, the people are more aware. And that is why I would say it again, our democracy is maturing. This is not what it used to be. What we used to have were people who will just become governors or senators and they are there growing fats on the wealth of the people, living large, knowing fully well that the next elections they could, use thugs, I'm not going to say that this election was fully free of all of that. But you must agree with me that in the past, it was almost certain that the sitting senator, if he wanted to return, was coming back.
Right.
Definitely.
We didn't have that. It was almost certain, like Michael said, that a governor will turn the Senate into his retirement home. There are so many governors in this particular dispensation, who were hoping that they will be going into the Senate that did not make it.
Benue State, for instance.
That tells you that. Sorry?
Benue State, and couldn't make it. As
Benue State,
the governor of Benue State.
There are so many. There were so many. I don't have the number. I don't have the names on my fingers, but I think about 5 of them.
Yes.
So as far as I'm concerned, that tells you that a lot has changed. This was not what it was in the last 4-8 years. It was a given. Once you were a governor, you were going to the Senate. Once you were, And so what it meant then was that out of the 3 senatorial seats, one ex-governor who did not think that power is transient and he will one day have to sit down with his people again and account for what he has done, will just head to the Senate instead of going back to being the ordinary person he was. So now the people, the governors and the the governors and those in power, whether they like it or not, they will go back and sit with their people. And so they had better do the right thing. So as far as I'm concerned, I see growth. I see an improvement. I see a nation that is growing in its democracy. And I am happy with that. I'm grateful, that now when people go into governance, they will not just go there and sit down, buy 40 houses,
Absolutely. We're hoping we'll not see that. However, Kemi, I remember before you started, you said you're not speaking as a politician right now. You're talking more as as an analyst. So I would like to ask you, as a member of the APC Presidential Campaign Council, what do you see coming forward? The president-elect, that Asiwaju Ahmed Bola Tinubu, his governance. I know that some people are in court seeking redress at the moment, and during his speech, his acceptance speech, when he was declared winner, he was hoping for a government where he could include everybody. He mentioned the Kwankwassia, he mentioned the Obedience, the Labour Party, he mentioned the PDP. But these are, most of them are in court seeking redress for the conduct of the elections that got him to emerge president-elect. Do you think he would achieve that inclusivity that he's hoping to get?
Well, let me say first that when you become president-elect, you stop being the candidate of a party. You become the president of a country. And I did listen to that speech, that his acceptance speech, and it was more or less like, look, let us leave this obedience, Kwankwassia and all of that.
Right.
Let us build this country.
Exactly.
Let us heal. Now, when you talk about inclusiveness, I would not want to hold brief for him, but I would not want to say that that will mean that maybe, for example, we will bring, one of the top guns into this government. One thing I know about the candidate of the All Progressives Congress, now speaking as a party person, is the fact that he prioritizes competence above any other thing. He will prioritize competence above gender, prioritize competence above tribe, prioritize competence above religion, and any other thing. He did it in Lagos. For those who may not know, I recall that at the time in Lagos, there was that issue of we brought you in, so we want a position. And no, he said, you know what? Nominate for me the best brains you have. You will be the advisory council. And that was what brought about the Governor's Advisory Council in Lagos. Why it seems as if Lagos is thriving. There were the people who were the politicians, but they were the people who he said, no, nominate your best brains. Because that's the way we have to move away from politics now and move into governance. So regardless of what party, and I say it again, I'm not holding brief for him, but I do know the capacity of the candidates that I supported, the capacity of the candidate who has now become the president-elect. I know that the one thing that is known for is the fact that he will prioritize competence above any other thing, regardless of the party such a person aligns with. So if Kwankwaso, for example, will be the best person in a particular position, and I'm saying of the 200 million Nigerians that are available, if he happens to be the one who will be the best for Nigeria at that time, I am almost certain that the president-elect, Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, that I have come to study, right, I have come to know, will put him there. However, this is not time to preempt things. This is time for us to ask ourselves, do we want a country that is growing? Do we want a country that, can compete, with other countries,
nations, right?
Not just in Africa, but across the world? Sorry?
Go ahead.
But across the world, right? And I can tell you for real, if that is what we want as Nigerians, then all of us must sheath our swords, and all of us must agree that it is time to grow Nigeria for the benefit of not just Nigeria, but for the entirety of Africans as a whole.
Okay, what would be your response to that? Do you think...
Well, I have not known the president-elect closely. But I think if that comes to play, if it does what Kemi has just told us about, that would be better for us as a people. There's a lot, on his shoulder that he has to do. Where, some persons are, not feeling safe staying in particular regions of the country. He has to settle that aspect so that nobody will be discriminated upon based on the circumstances of his birth, his religion, or where he comes from. Nigeria belongs to all of us. We should be able to live happily wherever we find ourselves unencumbered. If the president-elect is able to achieve that, I think that would be better for us, that would be good for us as a people, as a country, because I know for sure that the house that is divided against itself cannot stand. There's so much on his shoulder, he has to do that to bring Nigeria, to be, one country, indivisible.
Right. Now, Kemi, I mean, he had said one time that he is trying to form a government of national competence and not of national unity. Do you think Nigeria is ripe to look into, to do away with the federal character structure that we've been used to over the years and look rather into competence? While it is applauded and that's where we hope to go, do you see the sentiment? I remember when he emerged, when he picked his running mate, I know the conversation and the backlash he faced with the same faith ticket. Do you think it would, if it reflects, if it doesn't reflect national unity in his appointments and forming his cabinet, it would pose a problem in his governance?
Well, let me first start by saying that if there's anybody that typifies national unity as a politician, it is Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu. And the proofs are there. I do not speak about him, spuriously, so to speak, if that's the best word for it. I speak about him as someone who has practiced everything he has said he will do. At the time Asiwaju was the governor of Lagos, he had people from all parts of the country in his cabinet. And it never mattered where they came from. What mattered was their competence. The DG of Budget and National Planning is one of them. And it did not matter where he was from. The vice president was one of them, right? And it did not matter that he was not a Lagosian. So what am I saying in essence? I am saying that, Dr. Joe Igbokwe is thriving in Lagos. He used to be a commissioner. You understand? It has never, ever been about tribe or religion for the kind of progressive politics that we play in the All Progressives Congress. It has never been. It has always been about your competence. It has always been about your ability to feel the pulse of the people and give the people what they require to live better lives. That said, you said the Federal Character Commission. The truth about it is, regardless of the fact that the president-elect, right, has said it's a government of national competence, I know him as a talent hunter. And I know that more than anything else, as we speak, he is already searching for the competent people across the 36 states in Nigeria that will man the various aspects of governance that requires being manned. So when we say that it's national competence, it does not remove the fact that every Nigerian will feel as a part. They will feel a part, right, of this government. When you look at the aspect of religion, religion is the most, I think, base aspect where you should actually choose a person from. Right. Many of us today did not choose our religions. I do know people who are Christians. I do know people who are Muslims. I do know people who are Grail adherents. Grail adherents do not stand as Christians or Muslims. So if you want to call them, you will say they are traditional worship, maybe not traditional worshippers, but they are of the traditional religion because it is neither Christianity or Muslim. Right? Now, what that means is that we have to get to a Nigeria where how a person relates to their God in the four corners of their wall, in the four corners of their houses, has very little to do with governance. We have to get to a Nigeria where the way you choose to call God, as it is in the UK today with Rishi Sunak and all of that, will matter less to what you do in governance. And that was why he picked the vice president-elect. The vice president-elect, a lot of people do not know and have demonized him simply based on the fact that they just don't like him. He used to be governor of Borno State and all of that. But I challenge anyone to go on YouTube and search for this man called Kashim Shettima and look at the different times he has spoken and listen to him. One of his most notable quotes that he made, and that was what I listened to, and I said, this man has something. He said something that day on the floor of the Senate. He said, let us look at ourselves. And I'm paraphrasing because I can't remember in exact words, but this is what came through. He said, see, we are in power today, but the amount of time we will spend in power is shorter than the amount of time we will spend out of power. Right. So let us do right by the people.
Right.
Because we will eventually leave power. And I can tell you for a fact, anyone who reasons that way is in constant touch with doing the right thing. Now, of the harvesters, Borno State is an agrarian state. If we have 100 harvesters in Nigeria today, and I'm talking about the real huge harvesters in Nigeria today, Borno State has at least 80 to 85 of them. The cost of buying those harvesters we will never be able to pay with the way the naira has gone right now. This is a man who has invested heavily in his state. Go and look at what the current governor, what he himself as governor back then in Borno State did for Borno State. These are things that emotions will not let you see. These are things that emotions will not permit you, remove yourself from, because all you're looking at is the same faith ticket. Many of us did not change faith. Many of us just took the faith of our parents and we continued with it. Many of us have not questioned the faith that my father professes. Is it the faith that I should profess? So
that will be story for another day. It's still a very sensitive subject in many homes. But Kemi, we're running out of time, so I'd just like to quickly have your closing thoughts on if Nigeria is ready for doing away with national unity and upholding the national competence as it should be.
Well, at this point,
doing away, I would say is a very strong term. I would not say do away. I would say that we are ripe to be able to look for the pins in the haystack.
Right.
The pins, the competent people that may be lying fallow in places that we're not paying attention to right now. We are ripe because our democracy is getting ripe enough for people to pay attention to who they are voting for. Then Nigeria is ripe enough for whoever is at the helms of affairs, which happens to be Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, to go and search for that competent person, regardless of how far away or how hidden they are.
Okay, Kemi, we're really running out of time. So I'd just like to quickly get Barrister Mike's last thoughts on it.
Well,
all right, thank you very much.
Based on what Kemi has talked about, it's obvious that he knows the president-elect closely, and I hope and believe that, having emerged as the president-elect, he will do things differently. He will bring in technocrats, he will bring in people who have the knowledge to change the system, the dynamics. People who are willing and ready to make Nigeria, become, a country of our dream.
Okay.
That is what we want as a people, and I want to use the opportunity to congratulate the president-elect and say a lot lies on his shoulder.
Okay, Mike, Adinye is a legal practitioner and a political analyst. We also have Kemi Asekun. Thank you so much for being part of the program. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well,
thank you very much. It's been a great pleasure.
Thank you too. Well, this is where we'll draw the curtains here on Joy Asonye Live until tomorrow when we'll return same time to give you more. Have a wonderful evening.